Thursday, everybody. It's the 24th episode of Let's Do Lunch, the show where we talk about the business of streaming, entertainment, games, rights tech, and music. Today's Thursday, so we'll be discussing the wonderful and exciting world of rights tech. We have two special guests on the show today. Irina Albita and Maria Tanjala are the co-founders of FilmChain, and they'll be joined by Paul Sweeting of Concurrent Media. As a reminder, jump into the chat, folks, introduce yourselves. It's really a great place to meet people and post your ideas. Also, for questions, please use the Q&A button. It's right in the middle. When you're using the chat, also make sure to change the drop down so that you're posting to all panelists and all attendees, not just panelists. Otherwise, it just goes to Irina and Maria and Paul and me. So make sure to make that change in the drop down in chat. All right, we'll have a poll about the middle of the show today. Let me turn it over to Paul.
Thanks, Ned. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us at the Rights Tech Roundtable, part of the Let's Do Lunch series. I want to thank everyone for being able to stick with us through these difficult days. We've been getting very good attendance at these events so far, and good participation. And I think we have an interesting panel for you today. Before I get to it, a couple of news items in the world of rights tech. There was an announcement this week by ICE, not the Immigration and Custom Enforcement Agency in the US, but the Pan-European Music Licensing Consortium in Europe. And they introduced a new tool this week called Licenser, which is a automated tool for licensing performance and mechanical rights for small streaming services who don't necessarily have the bandwidth to be able to have their own licensing division and be able to deal with all of the publishers and labels that need to convey rights to streaming services. So it's a nice example of what we call rights tech. It's a fully automated system where you don't actually even have to know very much about licensing. You can go on and with a few clicks, you can secure the rights you need and be ready to go, at least on that level. I've actually reached out to the folks at ICE, and I'm hoping to have them on in a future webinar to talk about it. There's also an interesting ruling out of the Supreme Court this week, a 5-4 very narrow decision, or a very close decision, that could have significant impact in the world of legal publishing, which is a narrow but fairly deep segment of the publishing business. The ruling involved the state of Georgia, which, like many states, does not actually publish their laws, their statutes, as on a standalone basis. Instead, what they do is they prepare an annotation of their statutes that includes references to case law involving the statute and some commentary and analysis around it. And they then license that to a publisher, which then makes it available to the public, to law firms, to anybody who needs to be able to reference the statutes. The reason it's interesting is because under a long-standing legal doctrine known as the government edicts doctrine, the laws themselves cannot be copyrighted. What states like Georgia have been doing is not publishing the laws by themselves, instead wrapping them in this annotation, maintaining that the annotation is copyrighted and therefore the whole Megillah is copyrighted, and they're therefore able to license it to a commercial publisher. That is now appears to be a dead letter, and that's going to disrupt a lot of existing licensing deals in the legal publishing world. So that was an interesting rights-related ruling out of the court this week. There's also been a sort of thermonuclear war that has broken out between the theater owners and the studios, primarily Universal Pictures, over the windowing sequence for movies, with with all theaters pretty much around the world now shut down. Of course, some studios have experimented with making films available on premium video on demand services without going to theaters. And the most notable example of this was Universal's release of Trolls World Tour, which Universal claims has grossed about $100 million on video on demand, which is pretty unprecedented. The CEO of NBC Universal, the parent company, came out and said in response to that this proves the case for premium video on demand, and that is now going to be part of our standard release repertoire, alongside perhaps stay and date with theaters. Theater owners are terrified of this development, and AMC, which is the largest chain, vowed this week in a very pointed open letter that they sent to the head of Universal Studios, saying, we will not show any Universal films going forward in the US, Europe, or any place else where they have theaters, unless you rescind this or back off this idea of day and date release with premium VOD. And most of this is probably posturing for a battle that will inevitably be fought once theaters are actually able to open again. So there's a lot of chest beating and shots across the bow being fired here, but this is a fight that's been coming for a while, and the current pandemic crisis has sort of brought it to a head, and here we go. Speaking of the relationship between movies and or theatrical exhibition and video delivery, we have a great panel today. If Maria and Irina could join me. As Ned mentioned, Maria and Irina,
Hello,
there you are. Hello, hello. Are the co-founders of FilmChain, which is I believe, the first automated collection account management system for the film, television, video world. They collect and allocate revenues from various platforms for filmed entertainment for disbursement to rights owners and others with who have a claim on the revenue stream. Irina has a background as she's been a tech entrepreneur for 10 years or more. She started a few tech-oriented startups. She also has a background in mathematics and economics, so she's obviously smarter than I am. although that's a fairly low bar. Maria, prior to being involved with FilmChain, her background is in film production, line producing, budgeting, distribution strategies. So she is probably just the person we want to talk to about the evolution of the distribution business. So welcome to you both. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having us.
So why don't you describe, sort of for people who aren't familiar with that sort of back office part of the film video business, basically what does FilmChain do? Who do you collect money from? Who do you pay money to? On whose behalf are you handling this money? What could you sort of give us the 30,000-foot picture of what that business consists of? Either of you?
Maria, you take it. Go for it.
I was about to say the same thing. We're two peas in a pond here, Paul. Irina and I actually go way back. We know each other since the age of 5. I'm saying hello to everyone from London. It's ever so slightly darker here than the nice North American coast. So we are headquartered in the UK. Irina is in New York. We are definitely planning to launch in the US as well. It's all in our kind of in our immediate plans. But we started off FilmChain out of a frustration. To answer your question, how did it all start? It was really a lot about seeing this industry that we love. I have myself been a filmmaker before and have gone through all of the struggles of financing, putting together the entire project, making a beautiful, successful film, either as a line producer or associate producer, and then just sitting and waiting. So this game of sit and wait, it just felt it's not really aligned with the incredible momentum that the industry is having and is experiencing, and especially that we always see that the content consumption is growing. We see more and more people consuming on either all sorts of platforms or tablets at home, as well as in cinemas. In the UK and Europe, last year was an amazing, outstanding year for theatrical distribution, with the really outperforming kind of revenues coming out of theatrical release. So we were seeing how money simply is not flowing through the entire system in order to pay everyone. So at this point, we have focused our energies, and we have paired up with Imperial College London in order to make sure that we also have the best techies contributing to this ambition. And we have built the infrastructure for money to flow, right from the viewer, the people who are consuming content, all the way down to the filmmaker. So we collect, allocate, and analyze the revenues that we are collecting from sources around the world, all of the countries, all of the distributors, and we pay everyone in a very transparent and automatic manner. So sales agents, producers, and financiers are getting paid instantly. They are able to verify every incoming gross receipt, and essentially for amounts to hit their account within days.
So what were the bottlenecks in the flow of payments, or what have traditionally been the bottlenecks in the flow of payments? Without getting too personal, I'm not looking to tar and feather anyone here, but I mean, is it just because there are so many hands that it has to pass through? Is it are there stages in the flow of money in the movie and television business that is similar to the music industry, where you have the so-called black box problem, where money that can't be easily attributed to the right person or right company goes into an account and sits there until something is done with it later. Is that a phenomenon in the film entertainment business? Or, you know, is it just that you have human beings handling money and things happen?
I would say, Paul, all of the above. So one of the, of course, the quintessential challenge that you see across many of the creative industries is the fact that a lot of the infrastructure processes behind behind money flows are incredibly manual. So we're talking about people reconciling payments from one end to another, people going into their bank account and making bank transfers to one or two or tens of beneficiaries. This takes time and is generally done in Excel spreadsheets or on a diverse set of tools that don't communicate with one another. So for us, you know, one of the most important things that, and one of the key bottlenecks that we solve is, first of all, making sure that all the beneficiaries in a production, and we're talking here producers, financiers, both public and private, cast, crew, sales agents, whoever is part or needs to recoup something out of a production of a title, everyone is perfectly aligned from the beginning on a simple question. If this title makes money, this is how we're going to split them. And this seems simple, but the reality is there are a lot of challenges around it. One of the things that we have realized that contracts are contracts. They're great for legal teams, but at the same time, you also need to have a very clear and simple visualization of the payment instructions in a contract. Considering a lot of titles are complex, we're talking a multitude of territories, each with individual payment splits. We're talking about a multitude of beneficiaries and so on. So the one thing that we have solved from the very beginning is perfectly aligning all parties and making sure that through visualizations, through very clear contractual arrangements, they understand who gets what. So that's step number one. The second step is, of course, transferring the manual payments and the manual processes into actual automated systems, where the moment, let's say, we collect revenues from a source, it could be a distributor, digital distributor or theatrical distributor, the payments are being allocated or split based on an algorithm without actually someone doing the calculations immediately to all the beneficiaries. And that, of course, has taken us a number of years of research and development and of actually putting in place.
That's great. Maria, you mentioned that, or you made reference before to the ramping up of consumption across multiple platforms. And how does that affect what you guys do simply on a quantitative level, or is there something qualitative? Does it get actually more complex, or is it just that there's more to do because there's more consumption?
So first of all, I think it's important to say that we also address this paradigm shift as people have been used in the past to kind of create relationships and to make a lot of friendships, networks, which are great, but at the same time, they do also involve all these manual processes and this concept of trust. Concept of trust that we also wanted to challenge. We say, don't trust us, go and verify it yourself. And we are also not a company that wants to position itself as a kind of a service provider that builds essentially a network of people who they know and trust. We are an infrastructure and we are a digital platform that everyone should see the benefits of using this platform and the service, and should use it not just because we are going out and having nice times in film festivals, for example, but because they essentially need these new ways of improving their productions and recouping money and accessing data. That seems a lot to align with a paradigm shift in consumption. So we're simply seeing a boom in content consumption from the new generations that, well, sometimes you see influencers or people who are able to market a certain project better than any marketing team that has been doing this for years, or simply builds the community and the momentum around a project on very diverse channels rather than kind of the traditional channels. And that's that also opens a lot the appetite of producers to first of all to come to our talks, to try out new systems, to try out the platform, to see the demo, and also to no longer look at blockchain, Bitcoin, but to think of it as a technology that can improve their processes.
Yeah, you got a little bit ahead of my questions here, but let's get to it now. You mentioned the B word. Your system leverages blockchain technology to and smart contracts, I assume, to automate the splitting up of payments and the speeding up of transactions. Really hot topic 2 years ago, blockchain. We almost did a whole conference just on blockchain applications. These days, not so much. But tell us.
Which is great.
I'm sorry?
Because that means that which is great. That's amazing, because it means that the hype has finally settled, and it just enables the technology to really reach its full potential. Because no one wants to focus on buzzwords. Everyone really wants to have a deliverable. And also, I'm seeing here a question in the chat if we handle participant payments as well. So the blockchain technology actually enables for us to make an incredible amount of payments to unlimited number of beneficiaries at very low cost. We created the infrastructure on this private Ethereum, and which is one of the most advanced blockchains out there. And yes, to answer the question, we handle participant payments, so we are able to pay a large number of beneficiaries in a very transparent manner and automatic manner due to these smart contracts. We don't use any cryptocurrency per se, so that is kind of part of our secret sauce of how we have done all of the integration with banks. So we open a bank account where we collect all the money, and then everything else integrates with the system that we have built. So we're using the technology rather than create any token exchange. We shield all of the payments from the volatility of cryptocurrency, and we only operate with fiat currency: dollars, Australian dollars, Canadian dollars, pounds, euros, and a lot of other currencies that our banking partners are accommodating.
But the truth being told, Paul, yes, we felt ourselves when the blockchain was at the hype. I think it was great for information purposes to get make it more mainstream. But equally, the industry has got to the point where either there were projects that never actually managed to kickstart. They promised a lot, or they were using. They were making essentially promises that they couldn't keep in terms of either funding projects, and so on. And I think that it was for us as well quite the wave to actually navigate during that period of time. We kept very much to our core. From the beginning, we wanted to use the underlying technology of being able to record in a immutable way every single dollar, euro, pound that flows through the system for everyone to verify, but without, as Maria said, without any cryptocurrencies. It has been really challenging to develop and get to this point, particularly working with banking partners that enable us to actually do this in a very streamlined way. But we're glad that we're sort of seeing the other side, where we don't have to explain. We don't have to spend 10 minutes just explaining the tech, as we're not spending 10 minutes explaining Zoom or explaining how email works. We're just getting on with it, and I think that's great.
So, as you know, production of film, television, video has gone into quarantine, essentially.
No way!
Production has been put on the shelf for the time being. So first of all, does that have a direct impact on your business, or is it just, are you just trying to hold on and get through it like everybody else? Or does it have some particular implication for your business?
Well, I think, we're all sort of, particularly here at FilmChain, we've been ourselves really looking to put our network to great use, try to find also for projects. There are projects that have been incredibly lucky with, being already produced or 100% financed, or right now in post-production, where we've seen a great number of deals having been made. So from on our end, dealing with that contractual piece and setting up collection account management agreements and doing the collection, we've seen quite an intensification of deals in the past 2 months, month and a half. But equally, we're very realistic about new productions not going ahead in the next few months, and we're really trying to see how the market will adapt. But I think either way, we're really trying to put our network to great use to see how we can push some of these projects that we know that we're looking to shoot in the summer and have been postponed, how we can support them.
At the same time, if I may add on that, we have actually compiled quite a good list of how productions around the world are creating guidelines. So we know so far from Denmark, Sweden, Australia, Iceland, and the United Kingdom, and actually Hollywood released some guidelines as well, how they will be looking to go into production very soon. So definitely there are some amazing efforts around the world to think of these guidelines and to adapt the sets to some working conditions that don't jeopardize the health of the cast and crew. It is true that not everyone will, for example, afford it. There will be some of the guidelines are involving possibly an hour and a half of delay for every person that comes on set, because they need to take temperature and to go for several checks, or to have an extra budget in order to have a nurse on set, and all sorts of things that ensure health and safety increased in times of Corona. That being said, definitely the sets will look like they look like they will be opening over the next couple of weeks, and already in some countries they have gone back into production.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, and there have been some stories that have come out about people getting fairly innovative in how they're trying to sort of alter the production process. Producers, film producers, film and television producers adapting or adopting tools that were developed primarily in the video game industry for creating virtual sets and so forth to try to minimize the number of points of actual human-to-human contact that they need. A lot of artificial intelligence technology being put to use to create effects and enhance animation of things. So people are looking to technology to try to get out of this problem that the production industry is in. Do you find that, in your part of the business, that people are becoming more open to technological solutions or digital tools such as you've built, or is the inertia still a major factor?
Absolutely. I think this is definitely the time when we're seeing that people take this moment to recalibrate, take this moment to invest resources and time into testing out new tools, into assessing platforms that can increase their productivity when they go back on set. They know that their next project has to be amazing, and it has to bring the return on investment to the financiers who have taken this bold approach to finance films in times of Corona. So we're definitely seeing people much more open to and have the time to test out these new platforms, and it's very understandable. Beforehand, everyone was always kind of rushing into new places, new production sets, festivals, and whatnot. Now they take this time to sit down and to ask themselves the question, right, what do I need in order to educate myself to do better into my next production? And also, there's so much connection happening on anything from these amazing webinars to Instagram platforms and live Instagram talks, and the amazing executive producer that you always wanted to work with all of a sudden becomes available on one of these platforms, on one of these digital platforms. And these conversations are very, very fruitful in order to connect tools, platforms with producers and filmmakers in general.
Yeah, and it always seemed to me that, particularly with respect to something like blockchain, that the pressure for adoption, if it was going to happen, would come at the financier level. That is, there has been the demand for content is exploding. There is a need for finance, capital to finance that production. The traditional bankers, the studios and legacy production companies probably can't fund all of the demand or enough supply to meet all of that demand. It's going to require outside money to come into the business, but it's very hard to get money into this business without, or it would seem to me it would be difficult to get money in without a greater level of transparency into where the money is going. So it seems to me that the pressure for adoption of new technologies in the business would come most forcefully from the finance folks.
Yes, absolutely, Paul, and we're seeing it. I mean, it's true. Particularly from both from private but also public financiers in Europe. We can speak quite a lot about the private financiers, or Australia, as Queen Australia, or other funds that have been pushing their digital agenda by trying to work with platforms like us to manage either individual titles or slates of titles through a much streamlined process. We're really seeing and what a lot of the public financiers and private financiers that have been using the FilmChain system are seeing it as what they call it a one source of truth. Because all their different departments, the acquisition department, the marketing department, the financing team, they can all check and see the same data when it comes to the financial side of one title or of a slate of titles. So yes, they are to some extent the ones that are pushing for more transparency in this space. We're really seeing that it's making the decision of whether to invest or not easier. But at the same time, we've been seeing the decision also coming a lot of the times from the producers themselves, producers that have been taking the admin burden of collecting revenues and doing payouts to a number of profit participants, royalty participants, and so on for years, and that's not their job. So it's really
it's a cost center for them, basically.
Absolutely. So we're really, we're seeing the drive for bettering these processes from different places.
And it's funny because I've been seeing, I remember Irina going into this industry, and she was, of course, with her entrepreneurial background and used to like investors who are on the board and are looking at the term sheet, creating the term sheet, and are looking at your financials. And when she got into the industry, into the film industry, she was saying, what do you mean no one sees anything for years? What do you mean there are no reports? And how do financiers finance films then? And that's why it's brilliant that now we are actually able to address this. And we have heard from financiers who are, for example, in tech, who said like VCs or private equity funding, who said, well, if films are using you and I have this level of transparency and this access to data, we would consider financing films, because all of a sudden it will become no longer this opaque kind of gamble, but a much more of a sustainable, financially driven business.
We're coming up on our cutoff time here. I want to put up a poll for the audience to weigh in on some of the topics we've been discussing. I'm going to try to launch it now. We've occasionally had some technical problems here. Are people seeing the poll? Irina?
Yes. Yeah.
You see it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ah, good. I made it. So while folks are noodling over those questions, let's try to take some of the questions that people have posted as we've been talking. There have been a few questions here regarding basically your business model. How do you make money? Do you license your platform? Do you take a percentage of payments? How do you make money?
So it's fairly simple. As a collection service, and this is something that it's fairly benchmarked with the traditional collection services out there. We take a commission from the revenues collected, managed, and paid out. That is generally 1% and a decreasing volume tier-based commission. And there's also a setup fee or onboarding fee to actually get the inter-party agreements, the collection account management agreement set up for individual titles. But that's that. We are cutting off a series of other related fees, such as fees for interim reports. There's no such thing. In our case, all the reports are done in real time. We've minimized fully to zero, essentially sending out payments from the system to beneficiaries and so on. So we're operating on a commission and this what we call onboarding or setup fee for individual titles.
Also, we don't charge per transaction. So a large number of beneficiaries, including your entire cast and crew, if they need to also receive payments out of the gross or the net. We're doing all of these payments as part of the fees that Irina has mentioned.
Lloyd Remick, I'm not sure I know Lloyd, but he'd like to know how does one literally sign up with you guys? Does it require do you need, does it require all of the payees, I guess, to agree to do, have you handle them, or do you, does that have to be all dealt with individually? I guess
it's much simpler than that. So when it comes to, you don't have to sign the distributor, if that's, if it's talking about the distributors. Distributors don't have to sign in to this. The only thing that distributors need to be communicated is the fact that if they have any profits they need to send out, if they generate any revenues and their profits that they need to send out, they need to send them to what we call the collection account or the trust account of that title. So this is simply done via an email with a payment instruction from the producer, coming from the producer or the sales agent of that title. They send the funds, and that's where the system takes over.
So to say, our first point of contact is the producer. So it's the producer who onboards the film. So they would be the first to engage with us. We sign what's called the terms of service. What are our obligations as a platform, as a collection service to all of the signatory parties. And the second agreement is the collection account management agreement, where we align all of the stakeholders. The stakeholders are generally signatory parties, so the sales agents, financiers, and anyone who requests to sign this collection account management agreement. And then there will be beneficiaries, like people who will get access to the funds, and they will also see information on their dashboards, but they're not signatory parties. But the first person who engages with us would be the producer or the rights holder.
Got it. Question from Ned Sherman, our host. How might you work with Slate Funds during the fundraising phase?
So that's an interesting question. Essentially, we look at the whole process be it on an individual title or slate, fairly similar. Of course, it presents a different set of challenges, but it's for us, it's all about still aligning all the parties involved. When it comes to funding a slate of productions, of course, you need to think how you're going to split across a number of productions those funds. But this is something that we do, and we can contractually, the algorithm on our system can take into account as many different, let's say, payment instructions or slate investment allocations as needed.
Right. So Jeff Cohen writes that this is, I don't want to put anybody on too hot a hot seat, but obviously there have been inefficiencies in the system of collections and payments in the industry for many years. You guys are trying to solve that. As in other creative industries, there are institutions, individuals, organizations that in one manner or another, whether intentionally or otherwise, have benefited from those inefficiencies. And that there's a reluctance to upset the apple cart, as it were. We kind of touched on this before, but do you see yourselves as sort of agents of disintermediation, or is that, are you not trying to overthrow the kingdom here?
We definitely see that the biggest issue in the industry with these type of inefficiencies was the lack of infrastructure. So every time we have spoken to any companies in a separate value chain, they've all really were trying their best to do their jobs. It's not about, I wouldn't say definitely that we have a large proportion of the companies working in the industry trying to fraud by just assuming that everyone is a bad player in the industry that is simply trying to make money out of secretly running a side deal and managing to take more than the revenues that are owed to them. Well, really, I don't think that makes justice to the industry. These bad players, of course, exist, but per se, it is a lack of infrastructure and really companies struggling to be on top of the rights management, understanding cross-collateralized projects, tens of projects that they're selling all over the world, or that they are distributing, or that they're financing, or that they're producing, and keeping on top of making payments, be incredibly spot on with human errors when you have to work in Excel spreadsheets, on top of being tired, on top of having tens of other jobs to do during a 24-hour day, and also really the licensing issue, which so very often it's not very clear who exploits that content in which territory. So simply enabling the efficiency to take place, we are seeing an incredible response from the industry across the board, with distributors who are very forward thinking and are willing to try out platforms. Our features and sort of customized for distributors, sales agents, producers, and financiers. And we also believe that the moment that this becomes the norm, it will be very hard to reject it, because how do you justify not wanting to work with a transparent and efficient system?
Well, we are talking about creative people here. I'm sure they'll come up with creative reasons for rejecting it. Last question from Peter Petro. Does your system manage performance royalty payments for music synchronization as well? Do you handle payments to the rights owners for music sync in films, television?
So at the moment, we're kind of very aware about a lot of components that are not exactly clearly stated in the collection account management agreement. I guess it is always the input from the producer. If, for example, they want to involve revenues out of merchandise, if they want to pay royalties to VFX departments, or creative licenses, or music rights. This is not a decision for us to make, who will be the beneficiaries stated in each project, but we definitely have the infrastructure in order to make payments to anyone declared as a beneficiary that has a revenue stream coming out of the exploitation.
Okay, we're just about out of time. I wanted to share the results of the poll before we go. We asked, how would you best describe your involvement, professional involvement in the film television business? And looks like we have a lot of folks who are just movie fans or TV fans. The largest group, a little over a third, have no professional involvement, but the next largest group, just under a third, are in the production creative end of it. And about 20% are in back office, business, administrative affairs, sort of like you guys, I guess. Yeah. And 12% say they are in the distribution part of the business, sales, marketing, promotion, licensing. So, you know, we have pretty, we have people from all over the industry in the audience. We asked them.
Thank you everyone for joining. That's amazing. That's a wide, yeah.
How has the production shutdown impacted your business? The largest group, plurality, 46%, say somewhat negatively. And 31% say not much impact. So, you know, 79% of folks said not much impact or somewhat negative. Only 12% said very negatively. So it hasn't been terribly catastrophic yet. I'm going to share the results so you can all see them. And finally, when do you think you would personally feel comfortable seeing a movie in a theater again? And we have a lot of pessimists out there. The largest group by far, 58%, said not until next year. Marie's raising her hand. She's not going anywhere near a theater until next year. September was the next highest choice at 31%. So yeah, unfortunately, I probably I'm with Maria on this. I'm not anxious to get into a closed environment with folks just yet. So we are out of time. I want to thank Maria and Irina, and we'll turn it back over to Ned. Ned, what do we have for future music tomorrow?
So tomorrow, folks, we have our session on the business of music, and we'll be looking at it from the management perspective. We have Jonathan Azu, who runs Culture Collective, and he'll be on with Brian Calcoon. Brian is with the Blueprint Group. So tune in, same time, noon Pacific, for another great show. Paul, Irina, Maria, thank you very much. It was great having you guys on today.
Thank you very much.
Everyone.
Thank you, Ned. Thank you, Paul.
Stay safe, everyone.
Have a good evening.
Bye.
Stay safe.